And in fact, there are images that appear to be of the fly agaric mushroom in some early Christian art. The fresco at Plain Coral is one example of this. And it appears to be Adam and Eve standing next to this big fly agaric mushroom that has sprouts coming off of it. It's not depicted in exactly the way a fly agaric grows, but the stalk is there in the cap of the mushroom, and it has white flecks on top. It looks very much like an Amanita muscaria mushroom. Now, this has been debated by art scholars, saying that no, this is just the style that was used, a figurative style to paint, a way to paint trees. But why, though? You have to ask, would you start painting trees that looked like mushrooms? Unless perhaps you were trying to get across another message in that painting. In the ceiling of the Hildesheim Cathedral in Germany, painted I think in 1100, this era, there's a striking image, similar, very similar to the Plain Coral fresco, of Adam and Eve again standing, not next to a tree like Amanita, but standing in front of what looks like a fly agaric cap behind them, tilted on, so it's facing the viewer. So it's round like this, and Adam and Eve are standing in front of it. Not only is it perfectly round like an Amanita cap, not only does it have white spot, these are actually silver spots spread out over like the veil remnants, white veil remnants on an Amanita cap, but these are actually metallic hemispheres, silver metallic hemispheres that are attached to the painting. So they're actually raised bumps, just like you'll find on the cap of a mushroom. The veil remnants are white flecks that can even be removed. So this was, in my opinion, this was an intentional clue by the artist to show people what was really being shown here, what the fruit of the Garden of Eden really was, according to the artist, and according to Allegro and Wasson as well, that the fruit of the Garden of Eden was, in fact, the fly agaric mushroom.
It's just such a damn attractive mushroom, I have to say. It distinguishes itself by its beauty. I can't think of a more beautiful mushroom, really. At the same time, I can think of one that takes you a lot higher in terms of its psychedelic potency and entheogenic potential. I've never had much of a holy experience on an Amanita. It was slightly more of a deliriant and a body wank than something that would elevate you to the heavenly spheres,
It's the iconic mushroom, in a sense. I mean, it's the archetypal mushroom that goes way, way back to at least the Paleolithic. We know that Siberian shamanism is where the whole thing is thought to have originated, and that was a lot of that constellated around Amanita. And, the classic shamanic motifs of the ascending the world tree and having the axis mundi that links the celestial and the earthly and the underground realms. And in Siberian shamanism, this is often depicted as a mushroom.
I've encountered the Amanita muscaria mushroom and its symbolism actually in the material around the Finnish Kalevala, the national epic of Finland. It was collected together as an oral tradition in the 19th century and was called the Kalevala. And it's the ancient legends of Finland. And there's an artifact or an idea or a concept in the Kalevala called the Sampo. And the Sampo is kind of this magic mill that's capable of producing anything you wish. And it's really a cosmological metaphor for the starry sky centered on the pole star. And the stars are called the ciphered cover, so it's envisioned as this huge sort of umbrella-like thing that spins slowly with the central axis coming down. So it's also a huge image of the Amanita muscaria mushroom as a cosmological metaphor.
Muscimol, which is the active main psychoactive principle in Amanita muscaria, is a very potent GABA agonist. So it interacts specifically with these receptors and not much, and not at all with the serotonin receptors, except possibly indirectly. So how can Amanita muscaria produce these transcendent experiences? And there are several possible answers. Maybe they don't. You know, I personally am not familiar enough with Amanita muscaria to say that they do. My own experience with Amanita was very limited because I didn't enjoy it, but it didn't seem like a transcendent experience at all. It seemed like a cheap drunk in a way, but I dealt with, I was eating fresh mushrooms, and it's almost always taken dried. I think there's a great deal of chemical variation in the mushrooms, both geographically. There's geographic variation. The mushrooms in the Himalayas and in Siberia may not be the same as the ones in Colorado, just from a chemical angle. So there are many chemical races, of these mushrooms. Some of them may contain true psychedelics. Some of them may contain tryptamines and or beta-carbolines. There is some evidence that they do, these DMT and this kind of thing, do show up in some of these things, some of these amanitas. It's a complicated picture. Nobody has sorted out, somebody really needs to go through and do two things. They need to collect mushrooms very carefully from different parts of the world and do chemical profiles to see if they can define a chemical race, or are there certain races that are high in these tryptamines. Someone also needs to look at the way that they're prepared, because I think I've talked with people, and you have too probably, who insist that they are really very psychedelic, but you have to dry them a certain way, and they have to be dried over a fire. They have to be, and the fresh mushrooms don't get it,
The fly-agaric mushroom, unlike, say, psilocybe species, the psilocybin mushroom, where you can pretty much rely on, you can go by weight. If you take the mushroom, a certain amount will give you pretty much a certain experience, level of experience. With the fly-agaric, you have no such guarantee. You can have a mushroom as big as a dinner plate that will give you virtually no experience at all, or you can have one much smaller that can knock your socks off, metaphorically speaking.
It's because the mushroom contains both muscimol, which is the active ingredient, and a substance called ibotenic acid, which is far, far less active, but much more toxic. Once it reaches your liver, the liver starts dismantling it, and the first thing it does is a decarboxylation process which turns it into muscimol, and then it excretes it. So you can actually, depending on the amount of ibotenic acid in the initial sample, you can actually excrete more of the active principle, muscimol, than you ate. And so if you were to pass on your urine to somebody else, he'd get higher than you did. Purely because, and of course you'll pass on some ibotenic acid too, which he will metabolize into muscimol. And so in